All right, welcome to our mostly weekly New York Giants Preservation Society. We have a great guest tonight in New York Post columnist Phil Mushnick. I want to thank Gary Hyman for getting us set up with Phil. Gary, thank you. Just some
My pleasure.
that you guys should be aware of.
Yeah, thanks, Gary.
It's a warning that we're being recorded. I had to press continue.
Next week we're going to have Doug Greenwald.
Yeah, is
Thanks
Benny
to
there?
Dan Taylor. And who's ever talking, if we can
This is
not
late,
talk.
man. They may.
There we go. Doug Greenwald is the announcer for the Fresno's Grizzlies. His dad, of course, was Hank Greenwald, who was the Giant announcer, briefly did Yankee games, and is very famous for a couple of calls in Giant history, the Joe Morgan home run, and of course, the Will Clark Superman. Had an illustrious career with the Giants. The week of the 26th, I'm looking to get somebody from the Giants to report on the Major League Baseball trading period. Alex Pavlovich cannot make it, so we're going to work with somebody else, I hope. Let me just admit another person. August 5th,
And the draft is coming up too.
Right, Dan Faust, who wrote a great The Giants Experience. And today I kind of lucked and hooked into Terry Cashman, the baseball balladeer, Willie Mickey and the Duke.
Yes.
He said he's coming on. So that should be, a marvelous.
You must be getting below.
He just turned 80
Good, man.
on Monday. And then the Giants will be in town on the 24th, 25th, and 26th. I spoke to Peter Laskowicz, who's on this call today. Hopefully on the 25th, which is a Wednesday, Peter is going to give a free tour of the Polo Ground areas, anything historic having to do with the New York Giants. It'll be, he's volunteering, no cost to any of you. Of course, if you want to give him a tip for a good job, that would be up to you. And then I thought maybe whoever does show up for that might show up to the game that evening in New York. So anyway, with that being said, tonight we have Phil Mushnick, who's been a reporter for the New York Post for decades. He mostly handles media stuff now. And his column appears depending on if it's online Friday, the weekend. There's two columns every weekend. I was going to call him today when it was really pouring here and, delay the broadcast, but I knew he'd get upset with that, just as, the Mets and Yankees seem to be doing to everybody. And then I was thinking about making it a different day, jokingly, of course, because those teams seem to be taking, those teams and Rob Manfred seem to be taking advantage.
And we could do a 7-inning interview too.
Exactly. So I don't know. Phil wanted to cut it short. Then I said, you know what? I'm just joking around. But my pleasure to introduce Phil Mushnick. Phil, so nice of you to join us. Phil has some background on the New York Giants he'll share, but basically, most of you read his column in the Post. He critiques a lot of stuff like taking out pitchers when they're pitching great and bullpen guy coming in and ruining the game. Alex Rodriguez, retires from baseball and now is all of a sudden the main broadcaster on ESPN, and the guy should have been banned from baseball. So Phil is very opinionated on this stuff. He'll speak about whatever it is you guys ask him, or he'll just speak on his own. But Phil, thank you so much for joining us. We have a great crowd for you tonight, and we really appreciate you coming aboard.
Thank you. I'm kind of more interested in you fellas than you might be in me. How did this get started? And tell me, give me some background on the society here.
Yeah, we started in there's been a couple of organizations, and then I kind of took over in 2011, and we had quarterly.
But you're too young. You're too young to remember the Giants.
I did it. My dad was a big New York fan, and he died, and I started going to other meetings for him.
Okay.
So then things were not going right, we started our own organization in
Shit.
2011. And we had quarterly meetings in Manhattan. And then when COVID started, we decided to Zoom. And because of that, we have many more guest speakers who normally would not be coming to Manhattan to speak. So it's a great thing that somebody like you can get on the phone. Plus, we have a lot more people in the audience. So this COVID thing actually was a great thing for our organization. When the Giants won the World Series in 10, 12, and 14, the organization was invited into Manhattan to have a trophy brunch with Willie Mays. So it's been a great decade, and despite our aging here, the group is actually growing. So we meet here most Thursdays. We now have people, a lot of people from all over the country in here, from Arizona, from Florida, from San Francisco.
Very cool.
It's a wonderful organization, and we enjoy meeting here and talking baseball. Mostly New York Giant baseball, but a lot of the people in here still San Francisco fans, myself included, and just baseball fans. And they would appreciate any input you have on baseball. But if anybody else wants to say anything, the floor is yours. Nobody wants to say anything. Phil, why don't you take over then?
Well,
why don't you tell us about that Bobby Thompson story before we get into some of your critiques?
well, I grew up on Staten Island. I'm odd in the fact that I'm a third generation Staten Island Jew, which is very rare. I always say that my ancestors came over on the ferry, and my closest friend growing up was Jimmy Thompson, who was Bobby's nephew. He became a fireman on Staten Island, firefighter now. And our third friend in the triumvirate was Chris Johnson, who was Roy Campanella's nephew. And the three of us were inseparable. And I got to know Bobby, of course, through my dad. My father owned an insurance company on Staten Island. Bobby was one of his clients. And while I knew about the shot heard around the world from the time I was probably 5, I never equated the two. I didn't know that the Bobby Thompson in my father's office was the fellow who hit that home run. And then later, and in fact, it's funny because it was right after my father died, and I was at the driving range at Waikagill Country Club up in New Rochelle. And I heard a voice, and it sounded like my father, and he was wisecracking like my father. And I turned around, and it was Ralph Branca. And I introduced myself, and we became fast friends. In fact, my wife was very fond. My wife doesn't know Ralph Branca from Ralph Bramden, and we became and remained. In fact, I was honored to be a pallbearer at Ralph's funeral, and we attended Bobby Thompson's funeral together. So I kind of made that, even though I was born in '52, a year after the pitch, a year after the swing, I always felt a certain kindred connection to that moment in sports. So, and I will add that Jimmy Thompson was the fastest kid in the neighborhood by far, and just like the Flying Scotsman, Bobby Thompson. He was lightning. We'd play football. I just heave it as far as I could, and Jimmy would always run under it and catch it and run forever. And so that's my. But I also got to know other people through, especially through golf. I got to know Sal Evars, who you guys, I'm sure, know better than I, was a real character. And he told me stories. I mean, the stories about the 51 Giants stealing pitches, I first wrote. It didn't make big news back then, but Sal Evars, I quoted Sal, says, we knew all the pitchers in the second half of the season. And it's been in books, and I'm grateful that I was credited. But Sal told me stories about Leo DeRocha that were stunning. He was a backup catcher, and he was catching in Chicago one day, and DeRocha pulled him out of the game, and he was upset because he'd already gone 1-for-1, which was big for Sal Evars. And what Leo wanted from him was to run a bet to a local bookie for the what's the track, Arlington in Chicago, the track, to run a bet, and he was removed from a major league game to run a bet for the manager, which was I guess in keeping with DeRocha's character. But I've always had a certain kinship for the New York Giants. I was talking to Gary Hyman. I asked him if he knew about Eddie Grant. You folks know about Eddie Grant?
I do.
Okay. He was remarkable. He might have been the most remarkable New York Giant of all. He was an infielder, shortstop, second baseman he played for a couple teams, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Athletic, National League, and became a Giant, I think, in 1913. He was Harvard educated, and he wasn't much of a hitter, although he hit lifetime 249, which today could get you about $60-70 million. And he became an attorney in Manhattan, enlisted in the army at the outbreak when the American Expeditionary Force under Pershing joined the fight against the Germans and their allies. He joined up, became a captain, and he's buried in a Meuse-Argonne cemetery in France. And he was one of the leaders of the very famous Lost Battalion. You familiar with the Lost Battalion? Eddie Grant was a captain in the Lost Battalion. He was the New York Giants. Now, in 1921, they dedicated a plaque on Memorial Day in the Polo Grounds to Eddie Grant's memory. And I tried to find out where it went after the Polo Grounds was demolished.
Good luck.
We found it in Hohokus, New Jersey.
No, that was a myth created by a couple named Terry and Mary Cannon, who ran a website called the Baseball Reliquary that has now morphed into a serious baseball research organization called the Baseball Institute that's associated with Whittier College out in California now. But yeah, all of that was totally made up. It was a hoax. I chased them all the way out to California and got to be friends with them thinking the same thing. But it was just something that
hoax?
the whole thing, that it was found in an attic in New Jersey and some cop, that was just a story they made up to
they did,
and they
retrieve
actually
the
did
plaque,
they
right?
created a replica plaque, but you could tell by looking at it, it wasn't the original
I
one.
was not aware of that.
Yeah,
Well,
and the San Francisco Giants created a replica, but they put it in a place where it's not really visible. It's by the press gate.
2006, But I'm told that the original is mounted in Citi Field. Is that not true?
Oh, I wish it were true. My gosh, I wish.
Well, there's a guy named David Newman who sent me all the information. He works for the Mets, and he claims to have hunted it down, and it's now on a wall outside a room in Citi Field.
I would love to see that.
Shame on me. I was there and I forgot to go look for it.
Huh. Yeah, I've
Phil,
never
we
been
have
able.
one of our members, I think, on touch with you, named Karen Marco. She's in fact in the midst of finishing up the biography on Eddie Grant.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, if I can make up any more stories for you, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, but I wish that plaque were there, because the Giants used to have the wreath laying ceremony every Memorial Day. And when the plaque was stolen and the Giants recreated it. They don't have the monument on the field anymore, and there's no ceremony, no remembering him really. And it's kind of a shame. I'd love to see that ceremony
Ranka first told me
revive.
about it, and I was fascinated by it. I'm more of a baseball fan. I'm an American history freak, and that's where now you do know that there's an Eddie Grant Boulevard or something in
Yes.
the Bronx,
Yeah,
and there are two American Legions named for Eddie Grant.
that's it though, really.
Okay.
Yeah,
Those
the
are the-
Giants should do something for Memorial Day,
Yeah.
for Eddie Grant. And I think the Giants should do something for the centennial of the 1921 and 1922 World Series championships.
Hell yeah. But the Mets should do something for Eddie Grant too, I think,
Yeah,
Yeah, why not?
So Phil, I'm going to start the questioning with a media question.
Uh-oh.
Maybe it's me, but anytime some major league player seems to retire, they go right into the booth. Dude, I thought people had to go to school to be, broadcasters and stuff.
No, first they go to see Brandon Steiner to get limited edition autograph issues completed. Yeah, it's what Cosell, who I didn't particularly like, called the jockocracy. But they go in kind of, perhaps the most telling story was when Bob Cousy retired, and Rune Arledge at ABC hired him sight unseen, because he knew of Bob Cousy, to do a color on ABC's NBA broadcast, but he didn't know that Cousy had a speech impediment, a rather profound speech impediment, and but and I guess it's taken off from there. If you look how many the failure rate of big names, and they pay extra money for these guys, and they're washouts not for the most part, but I'd say for the most part. Washouts. And they pay a lot of money for them. The networks believe foolishly that they will draw people. And if they do, it's for 10, 15 minutes, and then they want to watch the game, and they don't want to be interrupted by a guy who's talking nonsense. You talked about Joe Morgan before, and Joe Morgan, who was one of my favorites as a player, because I was a Houston Colt 45s fan growing up, as opposed to a Mets fan. And I loved Joe Morgan. And when he hit that booth and he was starting to fabricate stories about himself, it became unbearable, insufferable. And finally I had to, expose him for what he was. He was he was a liar. And on and on we go. And Tony Romo's only making $18 million a year. And I like Tony Romo, but I think I could have gotten him for $16 million a year.
All right, we got Jeff Cohen and then Steve Rothschild. Jeff?
Thanks, Gary. Hi, Phil. You probably hear this a lot, but you're a must read every week. I always get the post just for your columns.
Well, there's no accounting for taste.
Yes, I think. I do appreciate, more of a comment. I do appreciate the way you point out the hypocrisy in the media and in sports. It's just unreal. And my latest complaint is all the stuff that's on MLB Network or watching a game, all the extra things that you see in the seats distracting you from, and I'm watching an MLB game and they put like a third of the screen advertisement for like 20 seconds. Like, why? I mean, it just blocks things. It's just unbelievable.
Jeff, it's television. Let it be television. If we want it to be a library, if we wanted it to be a mathematical equation that we're given 20 seconds to consider and then realize that it's nonsense, what are they doing? Why would they clutter everyone has these high definition TVs and they're going to clutter the view. It's the old down in front. Let us watch. And some of the commentary, the great test of any analyst or even a play-by-play guy, but primarily an analyst, is, would you like to be seated next to that man or woman during a game? Would that person annoy you or enlighten you? And most of them would annoy us. We call a security guard. Get this person away from me.
Well, they never shut up.
Exactly.
But they're coming from a place, you know, you're only as good as your coach sometimes. And I don't think I've run into an executive at a network who is quite the sports fan that we are. They think that the more graphics you show, the better their production. When it's antithetical to that. Let us watch the game. Let us watch. And I mean, for example, who hired John Sterling? It was George Steinbrenner. Why did George Steinbrenner hire him? Because Sterling licked his boots. Why did George Steinbrenner hire Susan Waldman? Because Susan Waldman, he wanted to hire a woman, which is fine, but Susan Waldman licked his boots. Why did Michael Kay become a radio Yankee guy and then a Yes broadcaster? Because Kay licked Steinbrenner's boots. And that's all it took. And Kay, in fact, was at the Daily News, used to be at the Post with me. Kay was at the Daily News during the Howard Spira thing. Now, to know Howard Spira was to know he was mentally unstable, that he was more of he wasn't a mobster as was represented. He was a bedwetter. And Michael Kay represented him as some sort of a Gambino crime family member. And that was absurd. It was absurd. And that Steinbrenner wrote him a check for $30,000 with a guy from the FBI, his guy from Tampa, Phil McNiff, in the room, while they're handing him prospectuses from the Steinbrenner shipbuilding concerns to lead this pathetic soul on was outrageous. And the proof of the matter is, I don't know, boy, we got into Howard, but I did this, and I'm sorry. But when Spira was sentenced, he was sentenced not to a prison per se. He was sentenced to a psychiatric institute, Butner, in North Carolina, which showed you how even the judge realized that Steinbrenner took this guy for a ride. And the only guy in a position of authority to act on it was Fay Vincent, and he did. And Fay Vincent sat down Steinbrenner for his second lifetime ban. His first one was for trying to buy into the Nixon White House, and set him down. And it cost Vincent his job, because the owner said to themselves, gee, if he can, none of us don't have, ghosts in the closet, skeletons in the room. If we allow Vincent to do this to Steinbrenner, what would he do to us? And soon we got, what was his name? The fellow from the Olympics, Peter Ueberroth.
Peter Ueberroth, yeah.
Who was never even, wake up, you. Wake up. No, you don't have to wake up.
Yeah,
And,
wake up.
I do this to everybody. Gary, you wake up too.
I'm wide awake.
So Ueberroth, Ueberroth managed by FedEx. He was in his California office with his photos of his golf swing. He didn't give a rat's tail about baseball. He was just, he had just done the LA Olympics, and we haven't had a real commissioner since. So.
All right, Steve, you're up.
Yeah, you told the story briefly about Evars with the racetrack. Not sure if you saw this, but in 2006, after the Prager book came out, Evars was interviewed, about a 25-minute interview at a cable station. I believe it was in Valhalla. I could be wrong about that. I have the tape.
He was from Valhalla, right?
Well, maybe that's what it was. Great stories. I mean, he was the weak link in that sign stealing thing. I mean, he spilled the beans and he told stories in that tape, the racetrack being one of them. It's, if you can get a hold of that, maybe you can even get it on YouTube. It's a Sal Evars on Cable Network 2006. Prager did the eulogy for Evars when he passed
Oh, he
away.
did.
They became very
Yeah, I have
close.
a book right behind me. And Prager gave me credit for breaking that story. But Evar's greatest story is the one where the Giants are playing. They're playing their way. Did the Giants train in Arizona?
The snowball
Yes,
story.
yes, the snowball story. They're playing in Denver,
Correct.
and all the snow was packed up against the outfield wall, and somebody hits a ball into that, and it lands in that snow pile, and somebody makes a snowball that looks like a baseball.
Artie Wilson.
Who is it?
Artie Wilson.
And tagged the guy out or something.
No,
And
okay,
then-
held it up. I caught it.
Yeah.
That's in that tape too. I caught it, and the umpire goes out. A lot of good stories. By the way, what Gary didn't say when he introduced the group, there's a bunch of, I mean, these are all big time Giant fans, but some bigger than others. There are some of these East Coast guys, Gary, Harvey, Larry, they watch every game till the last out. And I'm talking about games in San Francisco. So you're looking at 1:30 a.m., 2 a.m. every single game without fail.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So am I, and I'm a Giant fan.
All right, Andy, you're up.
Okay, Phil, the other
Yes.
name I used to use was Ramon Mejias, because you used to take my calls, collect, and I was contributed to your great column a number of times.
Used to
So
call
anyway,
45.
on a light, I'm sorry?
He died of leukemia.
Oh,
While
we did,
playing.
that's right, and walked
Romain
on
Mejias.
from that team.
The-
There's
the-
so much, we can talk about, but I guess I better bring this up. You know what our friend Brent Musburger's doing these days?
Yes, he's a gambling shill.
Right. What about this legalized gambling and what you think about it?
Well, it speaks for itself. I know a lot about gambling and what it can do to people, and I understand. I gamble. I don't gamble a lot. If I want a cruise or something, will I sit in the casino for a couple of hours? Yes. I don't gamble on sports. My last bet on a sport was the Pine Tar game.
No,
I had the Royals.
I did too. But you know something? That you know me with my memory. You suffered one of the worst, and you're not a big gambler. Let people know
I
that.
never did anything.
You lost the safety game the year the Giants won the Super Bowl. Denver covered on a late safety against New England in the late Sunday game. You lost that game.
I lost to the points.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's a matter of greed. It's a matter of greed. Now you have a Rob Manfred. I mean, you have a Roger Goodell who testified in Delaware under oath that he's assiduously against gambling because it wrecks your whole view of the game. It destroys families. It's nothing that the NFL should be involved in. They should be fighting it. And then within 2 years, when the move to legalize gambling, and then the subsequent move to sell pieces of the house to NFL teams and NFL per se, suddenly he's all in. Suddenly, well, fantasy gambling isn't really gambling. It's a game of skill. But nonsense. You put up your money, you win or lose. And it's every bet made is predicated on you losing. How do you do this to your fans? How do you do this to your customers? Now, in addition to buying tickets, in addition to buying cable TV and satellite TV and whatever else we're selling, we are going to sell you the opportunity to lose your money on gambling. Because if people were winning money, there wouldn't be any money for the commercials. There wouldn't, it's just like a casino. There wouldn't be enough money to light the lights. There wouldn't be enough money to hand you free drinks until you got plowed and lost all your inhibitions.
Along those lines, by the way, I was working for Major League Baseball, and part of our contract, we had to sign a we would not participate in fantasy baseball. It was a fireable offense if you participated for money.
How
And
long ago
meanwhile,
was that?
DraftKings was a big partner of MLB Network.
How
You know,
long ago was that?
just a year or two ago, we had to sign these contracts.
Wow.
It's funny, one time I was in the elevator with one of the vice presidents of sales, and I said, how'd you do in your draft yesterday? And he's like, I got Freddie Freeman in the second round. And we turned around, Rob Manfred is right next to us.
Well.
Jay, you're up, Jay. Jay and then Perry.
Okay, yeah, hi, Phil. Probably my favorite topic of all the things that you've written in your columns, your comments about the very pompous Mike Francesa. And I was just wondering what kind of relationship that you have had. Have you ever met with him, sat down and talked with him? I mean, you know.
Jay, we were once actually pretty close. In fact, in his moments of candor, and they're not many, he would tell you that I had more to do with him getting a regular gig on FAN than anyone else, because they had a lot of guys like Jim Lampley and people out of towners who were just speaking very, very platitudinal stuff about sports, Len Berman, and they really didn't have the inside knowledge. And at least Francesa on weekends with his football stuff, at least provided some perspective, some ability. And I kept writing, why is this guy a secondary guy? He should be a primary guy. And then he became a primary guy, a guy named Scott Smulyan from MS Broadcasting. Was it Smulyan, Andy?
Yeah, Jeff Smulyan. Yeah.
Jeff Smulyan, thank you. Promoted him because he was foolish enough to believe everything I wrote. And Mike became a pompous fool. He began to believe that he was something extra special. And then in time, people think that I fell out with him because of his extraordinarily anti-Semitic comments after 9/11. No, I was done with him long before that, because he would call me and plant stories about himself, about ABC wants me to do Monday Night Football, and I didn't have to check it. I didn't need a second source when it's coming from the primary source's mouth. And I'd write this stuff, and then he'd get on the air and someone would ask him about it, and he'd say, oh, I don't know where Mushnick's getting this stuff from. I don't know where No. You either say no comment, but you don't attack my credibility when you're the one who's feeding me the information. And I told him, I got on the air and in very unkind, vulgar words, I told him, don't you ever bleep with my credibility again. Do you understand me? If you're going to tell me something and it's not true, shame on you. Don't attack my credibility. And he said, oh, no, I got it. And then he did it again. And at that point, I said, to hell with this guy. This guy is just so megalomaniacal that I can't deal with him. He's off to the races. And he never came back.
So when was the last time that you actually spoke with him, or sat down or had a conversation, whatever? It's been a very long time.
I once at a charity event, we last spoke, and it was brief. It was brief. I don't know how long ago was it? Ooh, a long time ago, Jay. Yeah. you were a redhead back then.
All right, Perry Barber, you're up.
Yeah.
Yes, so was I.
You have
Hi,
no
Phil.
complaints. Is this sexist to say you're a very attractive woman? Is that allowed?
Well, you've never seen me in a chest protector and shin guards, so.
She's still attractive.
Wow.
Phil, I was very close friends with Arthur Richmond. I'm sure you remember him. And
I remember
you're-
his brother as well.
and Milton
Yeah.
had passed away by the time I met Arthur in 1983, I think. But he was one of my big supporters and mentors, and he hired me to umpire Mets and Yankees spring training games when most people thought women umpires were a bad joke, and I will always be grateful to him for that. He really put his cojones on the line for me, and I just think he was a wonderful guy. But you may remember that he also was similarly vilified in the Daily News by one of your colleagues, Mike Lupica.
Ooh,
Who-
not my colleague. I mean,
Oh,
he's, again, I
okay,
can't
but-
stand the son of a
Okay,
bitch.
well, he described Arthur the same way you described John Sterling and Susan Waldman as Steinbrenner's bootlicker. And I was very intrigued by your description of them as that, because Mike Lupica used that exact phrase to describe Arthur when
yeah.
he had convinced George to hire Joe Torre. And the two of them, Steinbrenner and Arthur, got crucified in the press because everybody thought Torre was going to be the worst choice for Yankees manager, and he turned out to be, a miracle maker. And Arthur was vindicated.
It's
but
funny
I-
that we should be having this conversation with a woman, because my wife, who doesn't know the Yankees from the Schmankies, once got into it with Mike Lupica. I had written something about Lupica, and he called his house, and I was in my office in the city, and Lupica began to curse out my wife.
Oh,
And she was appalled. And she called me at my office, and I said, "That son of a bitch." So I found Lupica down at spring training. He was covering the Mets in spring training. And I said, "Mike," I said, "if I ever had a problem with you, do you think I'd curse out your wife?" He said, "Oh, what are you gonna do?" I said, "Mike," he said, "You gonna beat me up?" I said, "No, Mike, I'm not gonna beat you up. I'm gonna kill you." So now he was working at Newsday at the time. Now, one of the Mike changed newspapers all the time, because even though he had a contract, if you heard that the newspaper was going to fold, he'd run like the devil to the next place, because and then he had the audacity to write about people's loyalty and their contracts, team member. But then that next weekend, his like notes column included a note right out of the blue, like, "Love him or hate him, you got to read Mushnick. He's a great read." And I said, "Debbie," that's my wife's name, I said, "Here's your apology. Here's your apology."
Were you witness to the incident where Arthur actually walked up to Lupica and threatened him?
No, but I wish I had.
Yeah,
Were you?
it happened. Bob Clappish described it in one of his books. But yeah,
Okay.
Arthur walked up to Lupica and apparently had the same reaction, turned pale as a sheet. And Arthur was 5'5", 6". This little guy looked like he wouldn't hurt a flea, but boy, he could take a tone. And apparently Lupica just sat there and looked at him like he couldn't believe that Arthur was talking to him like that.
No one has disliked Mike Lupica more than those on his own newspaper, because
Okay.
he sees every one of them as a threat. From Harvey Arton to Clappish to Mike McAlary, he sees everybody as a threat because he's so insecure.
Oh,
And
that's
he's
unfortunate.
also a limousine liberal, is what they go. He's in favor of everything because he's never even walked the streets. So,
Well, thank you for your honesty about your feelings about these people. It's very
I don't know if I'm being
illuminating.
honest. It's just my version of the truth. That's
Yeah,
all.
no, hey, we appreciate it. And what happens in New York Giants Zoom stays in New York Giants Zoom. So,
All right,
I hope that goes for our relationship too, Barbara.
we're gonna get a comment from Mo, and then Harvey, and then Jay and Andy.
I want to see Mo.
Mo, go ahead, Mo.
Hey, how are you?
Mr. Resner, it's such a great
Oh.
thrill for me to
aw.
see you and to be speaking with you. You've been emailing me and writing me for, I'd say, 25 years. Is that
At
about
least.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm really honored to see you and speak with you.
Oh,
likewise. Likewise.
All right, what do you want?
I'm glad to be on the program all the time. Gary is a super guy, and I'm the only one that's not a Giant fan. I've been a Cubs fan for years.
Shame on you.
I know. I went to a psychiatrist. She says it can't help. Nothing can help. You cannot change your fan. And but I
How
love.
did you become a Cubs fan?
Somebody talked me into it when I was 12 years old, and
Who the hell,
he was
Gabby
from
Hartman?
Chicago. Huh?
Were you from Chicago?
No, from the Bronx, New York.
You're like a communist.
yes.
We had that too.
Yeah.
But he took me to a Giants game. The Cubs won it big, and I caught a foul ball from Len Marullo, who became a friend years later. And he batted .240 for the Cubs. But one thing led to another, and I know the Cubs quite well, but I also know the Giants front office quite well. So they always invited me to a breakfast when the Giants came into town, and it was great.
Well, I know your name since I was kicking slats out of my cradle as the copy boy at the Post. And again, I'm really this is, and I don't know why I have to look at Gary Hyman while I speak with you, but I'm very honored to meet you. You too.
Oh,
All right, thanks, Mo. Harvey, go ahead.
Bill,
Yes, sir.
when Gary was given the history of this terrific group, and it really is, and
It seems that way.
oh, it's wonderful. But in antiquity, when it was being formed, when the Big Bang Theory was working, the guy who got me involved was a fellow that I worked with when we were kids in the Manhattan DA's office, and I'm pretty sure you know him, Billy Murphy, who was the DA of Staten Island for about 24 years.
Sure. I
And,
knew the family.
Yeah, and Billy was very close with Bobby Thompson, and through him we met him.
I'm sure my dad and his brothers were close.
I'm sure. I learned more about Staten Island from Billy, not to refer to Long Island as the island.
It was, no, that's the island. We were always the island.
Like San Francisco is the city.
Right.
My question sort of is, you wrote a beautiful column 3 or 4 months ago when Marv Albert announced that he was retiring.
Mm-hmm.
I got the feeling listening to your, it's one thing, Phil, I do have a criticism. You got to learn to speak your mind. Really, don't hold anything back,
I'm shy. I think everyone's entitled to my opinion.
Yes, but your column about Marv was the polar opposite of your discussion of, let's say, Lupica. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your relationship with Marv.
It was formed early on, 1977, when I was covering the New York Rangers. And I had no right covering. I was just a kid. I was about 25 years old, and on the road with Marv. And it was formed just in good faith, a lot of fun. Even then, he was bigger than life to me, and he never looked down at me, never talked down to me. If we had something funny, we would share it, and we ended up eating on the road quite a bit together. And it was always a matter of good faith. And you know what? I think we appreciated each other's honesty. He had that episode, which really cost him 2 years of his career for a misdemeanor plea. And a lot of people don't realize, you know, he had a fling with a nut because it was ruled inadmissible in court in Virginia, but she had used to beg her boyfriend to bite her. You know, we're talking about Trevor Bauer now, but and I guess that happened with Marv, although he was seeing Heather then, who's his second wife. Heather is a sweetheart. I liked his first wife too, but you know, I got to know his kid. We sort of grew up together, I was sort of like the fourth Albert brother. I didn't want to be. You know, you try to, in my business, if you're doing it right, you try to be friendly, not friends. You don't want to be friends with anyone you cover, but there are certain people you just can't help it. You can't help it. You develop a good faith relationship. You want to share a laugh. You want to share time together, and you can't help it. Now, does that color what I write? Absolutely.
Mhm.
I'll admit it. I'm just a human. I'm subject to the human condition. And if I like someone, will I be as inclined to attack them ad hominem? No, I won't, because forgive me, I'm human.
Very much so. Congratulations on that.
Jay,
The
you
only
have
reason
another
we let
question?
him in our
Jay?
development.
Jay, did you have another question?
No, I actually was going to ask about Marv, and that was just asked. So you can move on right now to somebody else.
Anybody else have a nice question for Phil?
Well, I got another one, Gary, if you let me.
Renee, go ahead, and then Harvey.
Phil, great seeing you join us.
Likewise, Renee. Renee Lockman.
No, Renee
Remember
Barr.
him?
Yes. Well, I mean, I heard of him. You know.
He was a catcher.
Yes, I mean, I heard that. I know what you're going to say, but I really want to hear you put it out there. Your thoughts of today's baseball: 7-inning charging, a 9-inning game, 3 pitches in,
Robot umpires.
everything. I mean,
The extra inning crap. I mean,
Renee.
the second base thing.
I mean,
Nothing has been the same. I don't want to get overly dramatic or didactic about this, but I don't think anything's been the same since the World Series became exclusively a night series for money. Everything since then has been predicated on money, and mostly TV money. And to what good end? No good end. And all these rule changes are predicated on a stunning absence of foresight. Stunning absence of foresight. Replay rules. I mean, what happens if a ball is ruled foul and then it's seen on a replay as fair? What do you do? Make up what's going on? Why would they go here? Why would they? The game survived for 100 years and it thrived without replay rules. This started with Barbara. It's Barbara, right?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Perry.
Terry. Perry, and you'll know this better than I. This started with the bad call at first base on that no-hitter for the Detroit Tigers. What was that? 20 years ago?
Jim Joyce.
Jim Joyce, right.
Yeah.
And the knee-jerk reaction, the rush of blood to the head was so stunning, and nobody stopped to realize, it was just like the NFL, that this call was so bad that it was aberrational. It wasn't going to happen again or very often. So let's change the game completely for an anomaly. That's crazy. That's crazy. And now we have every bang play at every base has got to be microscoped and freeze framed, and it's ripping the heart and the pace out of these games when nobody would have complained had these things not been enacted. No one. They got it. It's too close to call. Move along.
Can I comment on that?
I mean, I remember.
I remember when
I was a kid, when I went to games, I'd love to. In the 70s, I'd love going to doubleheader games.
Where'd you grow up, Renee?
And in a 7-inning game, I'm home by 10:30. 10:30. Now, I mean, that's not happening. And if it does, now it's 7 innings. And I feel gypped watching it on TV.
Well, if I may be so bold and self-afflicted, please read my column tomorrow. It's just about that. I mean, how would Rob Manfred like to pull up to a gas station and pay for a full tank of gas, and they give him 7/10 full tank of gas? He'd be real happy with it. Okay, I'm good with that. Bye. No, it's.
I still can't figure out where they got that runner on
all
second
this
base
is a
in
matter
extra
of
innings.
self-destruction. None of this made any sense, ever. Even to me, the DH is a horrifying thing. I'm not a DH.
Thank you.
Did you wake up?
You.
Huh?
I think they screwed up interleague play too. Badly.
Well, the All-Star game doesn't even count anymore.
I stopped believing
Interleague
the
used to
All-Star
be
game
spring
after
training,
the
the
moment
All-Star
they
game,
started
the
doing
World
interleague
Series.
play.
When I was a
Play
kid,
that was it.
when I was a young adult, this was a great event. It was a great event.
Really was.
It was.
Two teams that never saw each other were going at it. I was a bit more of an American League fan because I was a Yankee fan, and now it's meaningless.
I mean,
when Bud Selig declared a tie, it's like, okay.
I remember that one. That was horrifying. That game.
Oh, I was
I watched
pissed
that
as
game. That
hell. I
was
was
crazy.
so mad.
But let me tell you, interleague play ruined it for me. It really did.
Well, you know how it was positioned. Bud Selig called interleague. It was after one of the strikes, and Bud Selig declared that interleague play was a gift to the fans. First of all, there was no hue and cry for it. Secondly, it was a gift to the owners, who then turned around and doubled the prices of the tickets for interleague games. They made all these regional rivalries and then whacked up the price of the tickets. It wasn't a gift to fans, it was a gift to owners. So,
well, you have all these teams that have no geographic rivalry, so there's no point for them, and it's basically for like 4, maybe 5 cities, and that's it.
Right? Yeah.
Phil, how are you for time?
Me?
Yeah, are we good?
How are you for money?
I wish I had more.
Phil, can I follow up on the instant replay thing that you were talking about?
Yeah,
Every
knock
time,
yourself out.
first of all, I hate it, obviously. But my question to you is: every time there's a close play, you hear the announcer's voice getting so excited, and then I go to myself, "Well, it's just going to be a delay here because we know it's going to be a replay."
Like, cut to the inevitable. Then they'll sit there and say, "Well, I was close, but he was out," and then they'll say he was safe, and they'll say, "Well, so it doesn't work." But then the next time they'll say it was safe, and they'll say it was safe, and they'll say, "See, it works." It was nobody asked for it. It's being used predominantly in an unintended fashion, and rather than say, "All right, we screwed up, let's back off," the toothpaste's out of the tube. They're not. George Young, the late great GM of the Giants, he and Mike Pereira, when they were putting together the replay rule in the NFL, had a folder, and the headline on the folder was "The Monster Grows." They hated it. Even they saw it. They had foresight. They said, "We can see where this is going. We don't need this."
Broadcasters. And you lose the Earl Weaver managers kicking the bases. That used to be fun to watch, actually.
Yeah, I guess.
Bob Mayer, but we got Bob Mayer, then Harvey, then George.
Yeah,
Bob, go ahead.
cool. An honor to meet you, Phil. Just a quick one. How do you rate among all the analysts the two Mets ex-players?
I mostly enjoy Ron Darling. I think he's more apt to be candid than most. Keith Hernandez, who I like on a social level, because we used to like party up at Elaine's. he gives the clear indication that he'd rather be anywhere else. And I don't like that. I remember maybe the most telling Keith Hernandez moment was when they were in Cincinnati on Labor Day, and he started to moan that Morton's Steakhouse, which was in the hotel, was closed on Labor Day. And he was throwing a fit because they actually gave workers the day off and he couldn't have his steak. So, and whenever they go over the schedule and he's not scheduled to play to work, he seems thrilled. All right, I don't have to work.
Thank you.
He's no different than my brother-in-law.
We got George and then Harvey.
Thank you. You mean George Greger, right?
That's you, George.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, first of all, I want to thank Phil for what seems like decades of enjoyable reading. I agree with everything you say about everybody you talk about.
Except?
There is no except.
Oh, okay.
And you never badmouth. In fact, I want to thank you for being kind to my first book a long time ago, right on the Mendoza line. By the time I got around to doing the Cubs, Mo helped me write it. In fact, his introduction turned out to be the first half of a book with pictures and everything.
Mo looks like Luke Appling in that picture.
Yeah, Perry's in here in a couple of places.
Fabulous.
With Mo and when I had dinner with Joe West on Saturday night at Patsy's, he fell in love with this book. And Perry, to answer your question, Gary knows that Joe agreed to be one of our speakers. We just need to pick a date. He left on Sunday morning. He flew to Chicago to do the Cubs, but he was in New York last week at the Replay Center. So he invited me to either have lunch with him on Friday, which I couldn't do, or meet him at Patsy's on Saturday night. He was dining alone. And so we had a great time. We closed the place down. By the way, we talked as much about country music as we did about baseball.
Yeah, I bet.
Very good singer and songwriter. He gave me a couple of his CDs. So
are you Cubs fans out there or just nationally? Are you familiar with the guy who used to work at the Garden? He was the head of MSG Network. Good guy, Mike McCarthy.
I know him. I remember because I worked at the Garden from 78 to 96. So I do remember him. John Condon, I remember him. If you remember him. Yeah, I go back that far.
Well, Mike is now the head of broadcasting for the Chicago Cubs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So if you ever need to put the arm on someone for tickets, tell him Gary Mintz sent you.
Harvey, you're up.
I know we're winding down, Phil, and I don't want to go over old stuff, but I would.
All right. Good night. Oh, no, I'm kidding.
I'd be remiss as.
Are you a former DA?
Assistant DA.
Assistant in what borough?
Manhattan.
Okay.
Mostly under Mr. Morgenthau.
Wow.
Anyway, but that was another century. Believe me, it was another century.
All right.
But I want to go back to the instant replay because as a Giants fan, saw my first game live on July 10th, 1954 at the Polo Grounds. But one of the great replays of all time was in the 2014 World Series. which our Giants won when
Joe Panic.
Joe Panic flipped the ball to Brandon Crawford, who threw to Brandon Belt. And at first base, the ump in a bang, 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 bang play, he was called safe. But replay turned it around, and it became a great double play, and it helped us win, and it led to the great Madison Bumgarner's 5-inning save. So I know I've read your columns. I've read your columns, Phil. I know what you're going to say, but I couldn't let it pass by saying I'm in favor of replay because I'm not going to be a hypocrite.
No, you were in favor of replay that night.
You bet. You bet. You bet, Phil. You bet.
Your Honor, I rest my case.
You bet.
Steve, go ahead, Steve.
Phil, I'm sure you've been to Oracle Park.
No. What is it? And they change names all the time.
Well,
Oracle Park is
now. If you ever get there,
the Candlestick. I was at Kezar Stadium.
Doesn't count.
Okay.
Oracle Park has a Gotham Club, which is almost a tribute to this organization. It's got a ton of New York stuff, including a whole wall of Willard Mullen cartoons.
Willard, wow.
All kinds of memorabilia. And by the way, she's not on tonight, Rich, right? But the daughter of Mel Ott is on our Zoom sessions.
No
quite a few
kidding.
times. Lives in
Correct.
Tucson.
Yep.
No kidding. Now, what was his name? Bear. Is he
Larry
still?
Bear.
Larry
Gary,
Bear.
he was on our Zooms too.
Isn't he a New Yorker?
No.
No, he was a West Coaster. Okay.
Peter
You're thinking of
McGowan.
Peter, you're thinking of Peter
McGowan.
McGowan.
McGowan. Okay.
That was the guy, yeah.
McGowan.
So I want to ask you a New York question, Phil. Your reaction to Bobby Thompson's walk-off home run, because I know you got walk-offs.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Well, that's one of my favorite. Is there a mobster here? Is that a guy from The Sopranos? Am I in trouble? Did I say something I shouldn't have said?
Oh, you're in huge trouble. This is tape, remember?
Yeah, that's true. What was the question? I'm sorry.
Walk-off home runs.
the walk-off home run, Bobby's walk-off.
One of my ESPN is just a constant source of dark comedy. They have no right to be in the sports business. They have no right to be in the television business. But one of the funniest, it was probably a 30-second snippet where they showed Thompson's home run in 51 and as opposed to the other ones. and it read, or the narrator said, or the graphic read, Bobby Thompson's walk-off home run to win the 1951 National League Championship Series.
No, really?
Oh,
That tops Vern Lundquist, who said, we all know where we were when Bobby hit the home run in 1952, and said it, we all know who we were. Vern Lundquist probably never even watched baseball. All right,
Vern's a
Phil,
good guy.
you know, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in. You got my blood going. I used to call you, probably drove you crazy because
No,
I
you did
wanted to
drive me
be in
crazy.
this.
In fact, I've been diagnosed as insane. Thanks
But
to you.
you're so right about all this with ESPN and everything. But quickly back to you coined the term scam decappers, and that's helped a lot of people by exposing them. And last question, is Mr. Wexler still alive?
He is, and still saving lives. Arnie
He's
Wexler, who
great.
Randy refers to, is a former head of the New Jersey Council on Compulsive Gambling, who made his last bet, I believe, in 1988, and he has saved more lives than most doctors. He really has, and he's still at it. He's still at it, and he's not an educated man. He's streetwise guy, but the people he has saved from sure suicides or from sure ruin it's got a number in the hundreds. So thanks for asking about him, Andy. I'll let him
I'm
know
gonna
you were
try to
asking.
get in touch with him
He's in
you know,
Florida.
as this goes forward, because I want to save people, if I could save one from suffering.
He's in
that
Florida,
fate.
Andy. You know what? Email me. I'll get you his email.
Yeah, where can I, Jim Brown gained this number of yards in 63. That used to be your number. You could look
Oh,
that
that's
up.
right.
That number
Well, that
got
was the,
changed, so I haven't been
Emancipation
able to reach it.
Proclamation was 1863.
All right, I'll email you at the post or get it from Gary.
Yes, get it from Gary.
And by the way, these guys, and I know I'm talking too much, but these guys, like, I know Steve and Gary the best. Steve calls Willie Mays every year on his birthday. These guys are fanatic. Gregor, he's a machine with knowledge. Gary,
Which Willie Mays? Now, TNT during the playoffs described a fellow who looked like Willie Mays as Willie Mays, Mayes.
Yes.
Yeah. Hard to believe. Hard to believe.
Anybody
Well,
else?
fellas.
Anybody else who did not have a chance to speak?
Yeah, I got a quick question.
You just woke up.
Just woke up, yeah. The question might have been asked already.
Yeah.
I'm gonna forget my question. Phil, what do you think about? Well, two parts. What do you think about all this analytical, in my view, BS that's going on with baseball? And what do you think about these overextended shifts that we have now with the infield? Guys moving back and forth like from one pitch to another.
How do you beat a shift? Once. Swing. What do they do in spring training? Don't they practice going the other way? What do they do? What are they spending on them? What is Gary Sanchez doing in spring training? He's not learning how to block a pitch? For crying out loud, what are they doing? It's professional.
He's not learning how to run out anything.
Why did Dominic Smith under Callaway 2 years ago not bunt? And then it was explained, well, he had never bunted before. Wait a second. He had never bunted before, not in his professional career, including the minor leagues. He hadn't. As for analytics, you know what it is. It's nonsense. It's an attempt to script the game. It's an attempt to reinvent the game. And what happened to that guy? The mob. And it's an attempt to. It's not the game in its natural form. It's the game on a spreadsheet, and therefore a guy comes in and he mows down the side on 3 pitches. Well, that's our 8th inning guy. Here comes our closer. Now the closer last week was an Albuquerque. Now he's suddenly your closer. For God's sake!
What do you think of the 3-batter minimum for relief pitchers?
I understand where it came from, but I think it's absurd. I watched Pete Alonso the other day hit a foul ball down the right field line. And to his credit, he sort of ran it out, reached first base, peeled back, walked back, got the bat from the bat boy, adjusted his gloves, started taking some practice swings. He should have been back in the batter's box in 15 seconds. It took him a minute. And the cumulative effect of this stuff is that the games go for, and they're bored. I don't know. First of all, we all grew up here. None of us are kids. We all grew up loving baseball before any marketing division. Baseball didn't have to market us. We were in. Why did it have to market kids today? Again, read tomorrow's column.
Rich Rogers, go ahead.
Phil, thank you so much for your time. Did
you
you know
look so
Dick Young?
familiar to me, Rich.
What's that?
Are you sure your name's Rich Rogers, not Noel Peters?
Well, I haven't checked recently, but
I know a guy
I
named
think
Noel
it is.
Peters who looks exactly like you.
Is that good or bad?
Never mind. No, it's good. It's good. It's good. He snakes all the women. So go ahead.
I asked about Dick Young of the News. Did you come in contact with him?
Oh yeah.
What are some of your thoughts? Because he was quite the character.
Politically back then, and I've kind of moved more toward the middle now. Politically, back then I couldn't stand him, but stylistically and on a personal level, I loved him. Okay. He could write more in one paragraph than most New York Times columnists could write in a 2-part series. He wrote his heart in his head. He didn't care what you thought of him. He was very supportive of me. He actually wanted me to take over his column, Clubhouse Confidential. And I said,
Wow.
no way. I'm not going to spend, I just had a kid. I just had our second kid. I'm not going to, give my life away to being on the road 300 days a year. I was already doing 150 days a year. No, but he was, when he was buried, when he was waked, he had 3 pins on his lapel. He had a Star of David. He was half Jewish. He had a crucifix because he was half Catholic, and he had his baseball writer's pin. And that's how he was buried. And people despised him. And you know what? Those are the people who eventually missed him the most, because they'd never miss his column. They missed him the most because he could infuriate them, but he'd make them read and he'd make them respect him. And I always admired that. I did. And I was a Dick Young supporter back when it was considered like, oh, you're a fascist, No, I wasn't a fascist.
Not a fascist.
Oh, okay. All right, I was a fascist.
Well, I certainly enjoyed reading him, and that's quite a compliment that he asked you to take over his column.
Oh, I remember coming home. See, one of the blessings of my life is my wife doesn't know what the hell I do.
That's always a good thing.
And I said, Dick Young just offered me his column. I remember what he said. I'm getting down to the short strokes, he said. And you're a natural for this. And she said, fine, take out the garbage.
Puts things in perspective.
Correct.
All right, Phil, we
Thank you.
We cannot thank you enough for a really enjoyable hour and 15 minutes. You enlightened us. A lot of the guys here had some great questions. And really, give it up for Phil Mushnick.
No, lay down. Everyone go have Gary, who's already had his early bird special dinner, Gary Hyman. So just go home, everybody, have fun. And thank you for having me. Mo, it was a pleasure. He's still
pleasure.
And tell that guy I fell asleep. Thanks for stopping by.
Hey, Gary, do I have time for one question?
If Phil wants to answer it, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because they got a new rule in baseball. It's a fake runner put on second base starting in the 10th inning. Every time I think about it, I get nauseous.
Now too. In the 8th inning now, if it's a 7-inning game, in the 8th, which was totally unintended, no foresight, but keep going. I'm sorry, Mo.
Anyway, I can't stand the rule. It destroys the fabric of baseball. Putting a runner in on second base, ridiculous. That's my opinion. What's yours?
We share that opinion.
Leave the game alone.
Leave it alone.
Right.
Yep.
Leave it alone.
Right.
All right,
It's
guys.
too late. It's too late. It's been destroyed.
Phil, thanks again.
Gary, thank you.
We will. My pleasure, Phil. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed this.
We enjoyed having you, and please be, come back and visit us.
Drive home safely. Yes.
We will meet again next week with Doug Greenwald. I'll stay in the room to close up if anybody else